In teaching, a handle is something for the mind to grab a hold of to say, oh, this concept I get. Welcome back to Teach Through the Word, the podcast for Bible teachers. Chris Langham with you again, and back with me as always, Peyton Jones, right over this way.
I
How you doing, Peyton?
I'm doing
And
good. How
back in
you
the
doing?
studio, Jonathan Ferguson. How's it going?
It's going pretty well.
Ooh, back in the library.
Back in
looking
the library
intelligent.
today. Yes.
That is an excellent use of green screen, my friend.
Oh,
All right, guys,
absolutely.
we're actually starting a new series. I'm excited for this one. We are going back to the beginning and the book of Genesis. And in Genesis, this is day one in our 5-day series through Genesis. We will be looking at the heart of the book. Here at Teach Through the Word, we are here to equip you, Bible teachers, to do what you do better. Together with you to elevate the craft of Bible teaching. Get equipped, get trained, and while you're at it, get a behind-the-scenes look here at Through the Word. And behind the scenes today in Genesis. All right, guys, this was my book to teach, and taught through this one a few times, and was one of my earliest on Through the Word. And so this was kind of fun because I listened back. I know, Peyton, you listened through the whole series in Genesis, and every time somebody listens through one of my older ones, I always begin by apologizing. I always say, "Oh, that one's pretty good, but it's been a while." And so this one I actually really love to re-record, but I listened back to it and I actually love the experience of getting through Genesis again. Peyton, how was it for you? How was listening through the Genesis series?
Yeah, it was great, man. I actually really liked it. I mean, 50 chapters is no joke in 1 week, but hey, it's always soul enriching, man. I enjoy Through the Word. I should work for them.
You should. It's tough to get a job. I don't know. I might know somebody. I'll see what I can do for you. But let's get it started, Peyton. I'm gonna let you ask the question since I taught through this book. Where do you want to start with Genesis?
Well, I think always the first question that I want to know from you personally, and I think our audience the same, is what was it like to teach? I mean, there's a lot of varieties, styles, poems, genealogies, controversies. What was it like to tackle a book with 50 chapters, but particularly a book like Genesis?
Yeah, Genesis is like no other. The breadth of it, like first and foremost, to me, Genesis is an epic story. It is a grand epic. In fact, it is a series of epics. For me, teaching through Genesis and getting through the whole story, it's like taking the arc. If you've ever attempted to watch through the entire series of Lord of the Rings, or watch through the Marvel series, all the Avengers and all the stories that weave together, and to carry that entire story through. So teaching through Genesis has to be a deep experience because the story is so rich and complex, and you've got an incredible series of characters. Some of the Genesis spends more time on its characters than probably any other book in the Bible. The amount of time that you get to know Abraham, the amount of story you get with Joseph's story, how well you get to know Joseph and his experience is relatively unique for the Bible in just the number of stories and the breadth of their story. That's what makes it an epic. And in the midst of those stories, you're also getting God connecting with these characters, and all of them are firsts. Everyone's a first time. When Abraham's story comes into view, this is the first of God really stepping into somebody's story and calling them out and sending him to a land that he's never seen before and giving him promises of things that have no precursor, have no predecessor, that Abraham was the father of the faith and the introduction of covenant, that we begin covenant. Genesis is just it should be a powerful experience. It was also quite a challenge just to keep it up. When I was recording Genesis the first time, the app was set up to, I was recording at night and it was posting in the morning. And we were going Genesis 5 days a week, and I was trying to crank those out. And so in many ways, it was just a marathon of recording. And every once in a while I gave out, and actually I just ran out of steam at Joseph's story. When I hit Genesis 36, I was like, I cannot physically keep this up because I was working 2 other jobs at the time. and recording at night. And so Genesis 36, you'll suddenly hear a difference where I'm recording like 5 years later. And I finally came back and got those done.
Yeah, that brings up something that I noticed, and you mentioned apologizing. Well, I mean, it's through the word. It's always going to be good. The content was excellent. The way it was mapped out was really good. But I did notice that there was the delivery, and I think a lot of teachers, when they're starting out, they don't realize that there is content. There's what you study and prep, and then there's delivery. And I noticed you, kind of like an athlete, that with your reps, I noticed that you started to almost seem more comfortable. I don't know if that's a fair assessment, but I noticed your delivery, going from journey 1 and 2 to number 3. You could tell it was earlier because it's a little less free. You can see that
Yeah.
you start to kind of feel comfortable in your own skin partway through, and I would say even before 36. But how does a teacher kind of develop and improve their delivery style? What would you say about that?
Yeah, that's actually a pretty accurate assessment for me. Genesis was not the first book I recorded for Through the Word, and I wouldn't recommend it being the first book that somebody teaches through. But it was the time where I started to catch my stride, and I had recorded, I think, the original version of Daniel, and I'd gone through Ezra and Nehemiah, and I recorded a few. And Genesis was such a behemoth to take on. I waited until I could really set aside enough time for it. So, and I can hear the difference too as I listen back through it. Genesis, the first few, I was a little more stilted, a little more trying to accomplish something. But as I was moving through it, I started to catch my stride of what this thing was. And for me, I'd been teaching for years at that time. I'd already been teaching over a decade. Um, by the time I recorded Genesis, but recording to a mic is a different style of teaching. And so it took me some getting used to moving from pulpit to microphone. And partway through Genesis is where I started to really feel comfortable in that. But even then, as I listened years later, if you jump to the end, to the Joseph story I recorded 5 years later, you can hear a marked difference. And I hope so, because I want to get better over time. And really with that, I want to encourage teachers, Bible teachers, always improve. There's the Japanese concept of Kaizen, of continuous improvement, of always looking how you can improve. I'm always looking how to improve my craft. And this podcast is not just for Bible teaching newbies. It's a podcast for all Bible teachers to look to each other how to improve their craft, and especially if you move into a new situation. And I think more and more people, more and more teachers are going to be moving from pulpit to microphone, and there's a different dynamic to it. There's a different style, and I learned over time how to get comfortable with the microphone and really recognize that right on the other side of my microphone is a pair of headphones of somebody sitting right there with me and listening along. And I developed that style over time of sitting right down next to somebody and knowing that they're right there. They're listening with me, and I'm telling them a story. And I think I developed the craft of storytelling, the dynamic of speaking one-on-one to a person and guiding them through a text and focusing on the text. All of that always improving over time.
So that's really interesting because I remember when J. Vernon McGee used to be on the radio, he'd be like, "Now I've always believed my friends." But then when you heard him actually preaching on a Sunday, I remember hearing him on the radio on a Sunday, and I didn't recognize him as J. Vernon McGee. He was an
Mm,
absolute lion in the pulpit. But when he was in his office recording those daily recordings, his manner was very different. You're right. It was a little more
yeah.
conversational, and I love that that's something. Are there any other practical tips that you would give to people recording in a microphone? I like that you've said, "Hey, keep the audience in mind. You're talking to one person. Switch it up so that you realize who you're not talking to a crowd like on a
Yeah.
Sunday." Any other practical bits of advice?
So with a microphone, listen to yourself. You got to play it back. Get over your fear of your own voice and listen to yourself and adjust your style and ask people for feedback, because really the development, I think, as I listened to my older stuff, listen to myself now, I think I sound more like me. I sound more like normal me. That's one of the real challenges. I call it acting like yourself. You're putting on a character because a monologue is not a normal style of speaking, but the character you're putting on is your genuine self. Work as hard as you can to move towards, is this what I really sound like? Let your spouse listen to it. Let a close friend listen to it and say, does that sound like me? Is that normal me? Is this how I connect with you? Because there is a natural tendency when you step into a pulpit or a microphone to put on what you think you're supposed to be. And that actually usually is a wall between you and your listener. And so it's really important to learn to be yourself. But of course, it is a more animated, a more lively, a more engaging version of yourself because a monologue has to carry. And so you want, but be you, but up the energy and be friendly. So there's a few little things I do. I smile usually before I get ready. I speak. I loosen up. I get my energy going. I also don't record top to bottom. I record a paragraph at a time so I can really nail the delivery on each piece because you got these benefits with the microphone. You can just stitch it together. And I do a lot of retakes and going through to get the sound, the delivery just right after I hear it out loud.
So one of the things I notice you doing in this book, and you do it a lot, is you give handles or hooks to hang the hat of people's thoughts on. So for example, you kind of summarize Genesis as the origin story of the Bible, likening it to superheroes, which is something that people are very familiar with. So I like that you connected it, like we talked about before, to something people already knew, which is just good teaching. That's how the brain learns. But what are some other handles or hooks that you used to communicate the themes of Genesis?
It's a really good question. So a handle is a connection point. To me, I call it a handle because when you have a big suitcase, you're carrying a whole lot of stuff, but you pack it all in, and the handle is that one thing that gives your hand something to grab to carry all of it away. In teaching, a handle is something for the mind to grab a hold of to say, oh, this concept I get. But with that one connection point, with that one grab, you're carrying a lot of content that goes with it now that you've made that connection. So for the whole book of Genesis, I used origin story. Genesis is an origin story. And for me, I just made that connection point with the series of Origins movies that superheroes were doing. It was real big back in the early 2000s. But everybody gets that. That's something that most of our listeners are going to connect to. Oh, the backstory. And so when I introduced Genesis, I introduced it as the backstory to not only the whole Bible, but to life as we know it. But that methodology, the handle works in any teaching. So if you've got a concept, you're trying to find the connection point, I usually like to deliver the handle right up front in the teaching. So Genesis 12 was the calling of Abraham. And so I opened it with, there's something about a road trip. We learn along the way and we connect with the people we're with. Because I wanted to bring in that feeling of travel, that feeling that Abraham would have for the road ahead. So I thought the most connective idea, road trip. Everybody understands that concept. Oh, you get out on the road, certain things happen. Genesis 37, when we introduced Joseph's story, I thought, how am I going to connect them with the heart of the story? Well, the heart of the story is Joseph's story. So to get them ready for this epic story ahead, the story ahead will span about 20 years. For Joseph, those years will carry him from 17 to 37. And then I added, isn't it amazing how much can happen between 17 and 37? That quick little handle there is a connection point that is very relatable because people are going to have a sense of feeling for, wow, 17 to 37. Even if they're not that old yet, you just get feeling from those two ages, making that connection point. So the process of creating that handle, we'll cover that in one of our basic trainings. But really the process, I just look at what's the heart of this story, what's the heart of this message, and then how do I connect that with the most relatable thing I can speak, and then just write it up into a short. You don't want to spend a long time on the handle. If it's really truly connective to the mind already, it's easy to set that hook quickly and just pull them in, then jump into your story.
That's good. Well, hey, thanks for letting us pick your brain a little bit about Genesis, getting into the heart of it, and go ahead and sign us out.
All right, guys, that will do it for day one in Genesis. Thanks for joining us for Teach Through the Word, the podcast for Bible teachers. Tomorrow, everybody, we will jump into the context of Genesis. And later this week, we'll cover some tips and tricks and challenges of teaching, particularly the science in Genesis. 5 concise episodes to help you teach through the book of Genesis. Each week here at Teach Through the Word, we bring you one Bible book or one teaching essential or one guest teacher interview, those coming soon, as we equip you, Bible teacher, to do what you do better and together with you to elevate the craft of Bible teaching. Peyton, thanks for joining me. Jonathan, well done. We'll see you all back here next time.